Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator Huerta, I truly appreciate the fact, your willingness to become FAA administrator. And it would have been enough of a commitment to be FAA administrator under the implementation of NextGen. That in and of itself would have been a Herculean task. To take on this task in the midst of sequestration, in addition, is just another twist and turn. And you have gained a reputation in this town for being a straight shooter. My interactions with you, you've always been very information rich. And so I was hoping I could follow on with what some of my colleagues were talking about, at least in this first round, about this tower issue. Because, first of all, the Department of Transportation, with so many protected programs, it seems to me that the FAA is getting a disproportionate share of the impact. Is that an accurate assessment?
That is correct. The way the sequester law is written, it exempts about 3/4 of the budget of the Department of Transportation, essentially all the grant programs, which are primarily the Federal Highway Administration, Federal Transit Administration. It also exempts our airport improvement program, which is about $3.35 billion. And so it does, so therefore the impact does fall disproportionately on the operating parts of DOT and notably the FAA.
And unlike, some of the floor activity, we had to do more surgical approaches with various aspects of the budget. The Moran Amendment, which might have helped in this area, wasn't brought up. So you've been having to deal with this in a very blunt way, and so I have a couple of questions about that. On this tower issue, and I think I've mentioned to you both in issues, and I did in my statement earlier about both Painfield in the middle of a big commercial aviation manufacturer, and Feldsfield in Spokane, which is in the same proximity of the Spokane airport, and
Sure.
Fairchild Air Force Base. So they may have gotten beat out by some California cities in suing the federal government over proposed closures, but they are going to be close behind or join that case because they feel very strongly about this. You and I have had a chance to talk about this issue as it relates to your analysis, but I have a question. Prior to the agency's decision, and then revoking it and then saying it'll be implemented in June, was it the FAA's intention to remove the equipment from these towers?
No, we're working through all of those decisions on a case-by-case basis. And in some instances, local airports and sponsors have asked if they could retain equipment. In some instances, there is an interrelationship between, for example, communications equipment in the tower, how it relates to the communication equipment at the airport. And so we're working through those with individual airport sponsors.
Well, wouldn't that be very devastating to have this equipment removed? Because then how would you go back to, if either the sequester issue was resolved or a community response was activated, how would you deal with this loss of equipment? So I think we need a clear answer about equipment as well. We hope the answer is that the equipment stays.
For the most part, the equipment stays, but there are certain limited circumstances where we might come to a different conclusion there, and we can talk about specific facilities.
Well, I think as my colleagues have mentioned, this is a very important issue. When a community of a significant size says they're going to sue over this issue, I take it very seriously. And I hope that, Mr. Chairman, we can resolve this issue either on the floor or some instance, because I think while the public understands tightening of the belt, I don't know that they understand that the FAA within the Department of Transportation is taking a very direct hit on this. And I think that it has various communities in my state concerned about it. I wondered, Mr. Guzzetti mentioned that part of the safety culture and regime that we have to establish is implementing the mandates of Congress. And so obviously we did, in a major piece of safety legislation, ask for various rules on qualification of pilots and training and mentoring and database issues and a whole sort of other things. Mr. Dillingham mentioned this issue of runway incursions and getting the right data. So is the sequestration going to impact us getting those rules?
Well, the rules have different schedules that they're working on. I was already asked about the issue of pilot qualifications, and I said that we would make the August timetable for that, and we do intend to do so. Another one that is an extremely high priority for us is the rule related to crew member training. And you'll recall at my confirmation hearing last year, I committed to completing that rule by October of this year. We are on track, and we will complete that
So
rule by
will,
October of this
will
year.
the sequestration affect any of the rulemaking?
In other rulemakings, I would expect to see delays. But what it depends on is availability of hours I have for people in the rulemaking office and across the agency to do the needed work to get these rules done in a timely fashion. If I have fewer hours available to me, it does affect the full scope of everything the FAA does.
Well, as Mr. Guzzetti said, it's important to get these mandates fulfilled. So anyway, Mr. Chairman, well, I think we need to keep looking at this issue. I know my time has expired, but it's important to understand what isn't going to get done, during sequestration as these important rules that we mandated, we want to see them implemented. I didn't even mention the cargo, issue. We've implemented rules, but people who are flying in our skies want to know that those who are flying cargo planes also meet the same kind of standards as other pilots for fatigue and operation. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Administrator Huerta, could we add to this list too, what is the impact on NextGen implementation from sequestration? If you have a general idea, you can tell me now if you want to get back to us, but what will the impact on that be?
I'll provide you a general sense of what we're seeing this year, and then, for the record, provide a more detailed response. Within the current year, the principal impact we will see is related to the need to bring operational personnel back to their home facilities to work on day-to-day operations. What that means is that we're pulling individuals off of what we call collaborative work groups. These are work groups that we set up with FAA employees to work with contractors and to work with our engineering and planning staffs that are deploying NextGen to actually work through the details of how is this system going to handle live traffic. And this is an extremely important aspect of what we do. In the past, the agency hadn't done as much of that. That has gotten into trouble on large programs. A few years ago, it was a program called ERAM, which is the modernization of our en route platform. And once we adopted these practices, we found that we had a much more seamless transition to new technology. And so the need to pull back resources and personnel from these activities will delay the implementation of some of these new technologies. We're viewing that.
Aren't there some competitiveness issues with us getting NextGen implemented?
Well, the thing, where it affects us right now is in our program where we're focusing on, it's our program called the Optimization of Airspace Procedures. That's the deployment of performance-based navigation that has the ability to reduce fuel burn, reduce costs, reduce emissions and noise impacts in local communities. And we have a number of these going around the country. You have probably one of the best known up there in Seattle, an initiative called Greener Skies. It does slow down the deployment of those for two reasons. One is we don't have the people that can work through the operational details that we're able to deploy between now and the end of the fiscal year. The second aspect of that is development and maintaining procedures in and of itself is an expenditure for contractors, for design, for publication, and training.
So I'd love to get more details of
Sure.
A written response so that we could share that with our colleagues about what the impact on that is. I'd like to turn, so what are the mechanisms the FAA is going to use to resolve the adverse conditions on the 787 issue, and how will you, is that something the Secretary does as an official final decision, or how do you decide about ETOP issues, all of that? Could you give us some idea?
Sure. What Boeing presented to us last month was a certification plan, and the certification plan had several components to it, but it essentially resulted in a redesign of the battery systems within the airplane, a containment system such that to provide another layer of safety, And then also included, and this was something that was negotiated with them, where we asked for thresholds to be met in terms of maintaining the highest levels of safety. Once the certification plan was approved by us last month, then they embarked on a series of tests that we required, about 20 distinct tests, to prove that the system would operate as designed. Boeing has completed the testing and has provided a very extensive set of documents to the FAA, and those documents are currently under review right now. And that will result in us making a final determination as to whether the aircraft can return to flight. Coincident with that review was a review where we went back and looked at our original determination relating to ETOPS flight. And the question there is, the airplane, when it was grounded, was certified for ETOPS of 180 minutes. And so the question for us was, would we return it at that level? And so that review is a concurrent review ongoing, and when we make our final determination with respect to return to flight, we will also address that question.
So is this something the Secretary decides, or the FAA decides, or?
This is a determination and a recommendation that's made by all technical experts. It was my decision to ground the fleet, and I would be the one making the recommendation going forward.
I see my time has expired, Mr. Chairman. The only other question I had was for Mr. Dillingham about the process for, with composites. We were very involved with composite manufacturing and getting the FAA Center of Excellence established, which was a program to help collaboration between research institutions, the FAA, and manufacturers identify issues. And I think you did a report on that certification process in which you think that that worked well. Is that?
Yes, that's
Is that a
correct.
model for what we should be doing? Is that what?
We looked in depth at the certification of the composite aspect of the Dreamliner 787, and in all cases, we found that FAA did an excellent job. It could be a model for future situations such as that, because clearly composites are going to be an ever-increasing part of aviation manufacture, as it has been for decades now. It will continue to grow.
And Mr. Secretary, in all the balancing of these issues, NextGen, the tower sequestration, battery issues, all of that, how do you prioritize these rulemakings that Mr. Guzzetti was talking about being so essential? Do you prioritize them in a ranking? Mr. Chairman, having oversight of the Coast Guard Committee for a while, and them being challenged with the implementation of the, what was then called Deepwater Acquisition Program, we got to a point where so many members had so many interests in these various priorities, and I could go into this issue of the helicopter and medical issue, but do you prioritize these rulemakings within the agencies so that we can give members some idea of their prioritization?
We do. We go through a regular process of identifying what are deadlines for rulemakings, what are available resources. Every rulemaking requires a level of technical expertise associated with developing and ultimately promulgating and implementing a rule, how it relates to staff that are available or contractors that are available to perform the needed cost-benefit analysis that Senator Coates asked about. And so it's marrying the technical expertise that we have with the timetables that have been developed and the complexity of the rule, and then the benefit that the rule will enable us to achieve as a result of that. And that's a regular process that we do go through.
Well, it would be, I think, nice for the larger aviation community to have a sense of the prioritization of those rules. I mean, I'm sure some of it can be done simultaneously, but
Sure.
In the context of people being able to weigh in on that prioritization. So we just have a little more definition about what's coming next and when. And I know that you commented today, which was great, on the actual pilot rules that had to be implemented in their time frame. But since we just went through this entire list of things that you're responsible for in a shrinking budget, I think part of our challenge is to communicate exactly what that means from a time frame to our constituents. So I would appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much